Hello, and welcome to Storytime with Jamie on how I got diagnosed with nodular sclerosis, Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is the type of lymphoma that I have. It's a long story. I'm going to see how short I can make this. This is my third time filming this because I'm a newbie. I don't know what I'm doing. So I starts back in September. And if I don't look at the camera, I'm sorry, it's a little weird. So I ended up in September with a really bad outer and inner ear infection, along with a really bad sinus infection, to the point that my lymph nodes swelled really bad. Not uncommon for me if I get really, really, really sick. So I ended up going to my doctor, and he was like, well, I mean, it doesn't seem that bad. You have really opaque eardrum, so I can't really see the infection. And I kind of went like this, and he goes, oh. And so you could actually see the eardrum back here. It was that swollen. So he ended up with prescribing me a really, really strong antibiotic, in which everything started going down. I started feeling better. And when I have my lymph nodes, because they're very reactive, like I said, swell, I normally end up with a round of prednisone, because it ends up taking, a month, maybe even 6 weeks sometimes for it to go down. And so we just kind of speed it along. About a week after the antibiotic, once we know that it's worked. So he gives me that, and I ended up with, so everything goes down. About 3 weeks later, so it's mid-October, everything starts flaring up again. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I sick again? I'm never sick, except for the odd sinus infection. I very rarely get sick. I have a very robust immune system. So I was like, really? And so I decided to give it a week or two, which leads us into the beginning of November. And every year, my mom and I make kuah, which is a German pastry. And we make it every year for Christmas for our friends, our family, that kind of stuff. And so it takes us a whole weekend, but we do it. So I stayed at their house that weekend, and we were making kuah, and she saw my neck. She kind of went, okay. And mom and dad are both RNs. And so I said, yeah, I know. I think I might have tonsillitis. And she goes, or I don't know that infection cleared. She goes, I think it's a chronic infection. I think you need IV antibiotics. And I said, okay. And so found an ENT online. That ENT happened to be somebody that my doctor at the time was doing referrals to. He's not really doing those anymore. And it took them 3 weeks to get me in. So I didn't see them until the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So, like I said, I've never seen this doc before. He doesn't have any of my information. He has nothing about me. So, because this wasn't a referral from my doc, so they didn't send any of my records or anything over. So I had an appointment with the PA. Since I said it might be a chronic ear infection, they put me in with the PA. And so she looks at my ears and she goes, I can't really see because they're pretty opaque. But she's like, I don't think that is. She goes, I think this is actually more neck. And I was like, great. It's tonsillitis. I don't have time for this. She was like, but I need to get the doc. So she was gone for a while. And I could hear them talking in the hallway. And I was like, man, they're gone for a long time. What I didn't realize was he had pretty much diagnosed me without seeing me. And so he comes in, palpates my neck, so, feels around, and then looks at me. Let's be clear, I'm in there by myself. And sits down in his chair, backwards facing, happy as a clam, looks at me and goes, so what I think we're looking at is either lymphoma or possibly an autoimmune. And for those of you who don't know me, I have a wonderful poker face. Very good at it. Don't play poker with me. I'm very good at it. So he doesn't see what goes on behind this face, which is, excuse my French, what the hell? And, because ironically, the weekend before that, I was with a friend, and she saw my neck. I had a high neck sweatshirt on, kind of a mock turtleneck sweatshirt thing, and we pulled it down so she could see it, and she goes, whoa, and I go, yeah, we think it's either a chronic infection, which at the time Mom was thinking staph, MRSA, something of that sort, or tonsillitis. I said, so either I get to have IV antibiotics or possibly surgery. Yay. And she was like, wow. And I was like, yeah. And so I said, but don't worry, it's not cancer. Because those of you who don't know, it is actually very, very, my kind of lymphoma is extremely rare. Like, very rare. Caught the quickest more than any other form of lymphoma because it's visible. Every other form of lymphoma is inside. And so you don't really see it. You kind of feel it, like stomach pains, that kind of, like most people report lymphoma first in their stomach. Like you palpate, it hurts. Like it starts in the stomach area. That's not inside the stomach, but in that area. And so, and I'm not a doctor. So those of you who are doctors who are like, yeah, it's a little wrong, don't come at me. I'm not a doctor. And so so he says that. Then he steps out, step by step, the diagnosis process. And I was like, oh my, it's going to take 2 months for me to figure out whether I have cancer or not. Great. I'm going to have a very stressful, high intensity 2 months. And so I looked at him and I was like, well, if this is lymphoma, what kind of lymphoma are we what are we looking at? And he goes, well, it could be Hodgkin's, which is very treatable, very curable. I said, okay. And he goes, or it could be non-Hodgkin's, which not as treatable, more deadly. And I was like, okay. Again, my face is schooled. And I'm just sitting in my head in shock / panicking. And the only indication to them that I'm not taking this like a champ, which, hello, you gave somebody a possible cancer diagnosis, you should be worried, is that I have turned about as white as that. And I know I'm very pale, but that's a whole lot whiter than me. And so I just wanted to get out of there. And he was like, we need to schedule the biopsy. Fine needle biopsy means that they do it in office, something similar to an insulin syringe into your lymph node. Ends up that's a bad idea. We'll explain that later as to why. And so he was like, you need to make an appointment. I was like, okay. So I go up to the front, 2 ladies, I can barely get them, the 2 receptionists, to stop talking to each other and pay attention to me so I can get out of there because I'm holding on by just a thread, trying to call my mom. Like, I just wanted to call my mom. And finally get out of there, get into the parking lot, call my mom, and she answers the phone. She's like, hey, so what'd they say? Because she knew where I was at. And I said, it's not good. And I started crying. And then she was like, wait, what? Because she could hear me start crying. I said, they think I have lymphoma. And Mom goes, wait, what? And like I said, Mom and Dad are both RNs. So nobody was expecting that. And because like I said, the kind that I have is very rare. So 9 times out of 10, this video is not meant to scare anybody who has swelling of lymph nodes in your neck. 9 times out of 10, it is not going to be lymphoma. It's going to be some kind of infection, something of that sort. It is not lymphoma. So it is very rare that it actually is. And probably even less than 9 times out of 10. So she finally gets me to a point where I'm semi-calm. Not completely, but semi-calm. And she goes, you need to call she called my best friend by her name, but I'm not going to on here. She said, you need to call your best friend, who's a doctor. And she was like, get her opinion, figure out what she thinks. And what I didn't realize was she was going to call her best friend, who is also in the medical industry and works at a pretty prestigious hospital in California and is number 3 at that hospital. And so I didn't realize she was going to call her. So I called my best friend, or sent her a text message and said, hey, can you talk? I never really sent her those. And so she was like, uh-oh, something's wrong. She knew I had my ENT appointment. She wasn't actually thinking it was that. She was thinking it was something else to do with something else, which I'm not going to talk about on here. And so she was like, well, Jamie never calls me or never sends that. So I'm going to call her. She calls me and she said, hey, what's up? And I said, I had that ENT appointment today. And she goes, yeah. I said, they think it's lymphoma. And she goes, what? And she goes, based on what? I said, well, they palpated my neck. And she goes, and I go, no, that's it. And she goes, wait, they gave you a possible cancer diagnosis with no data? And I said, yeah. And she goes, so they haven't done a CT, they haven't done a biopsy, but they gave you a possible cancer diagnosis for that. And I said, yeah. And she goes, no, you don't do that. You don't do that at all. She goes, you don't give somebody a possible cancer diagnosis without that. She goes, especially not when they're in the room by themselves. I was like, well, they did. She goes, and so we talked for a bit more. There was more to that conversation. But basically at the end, it was second opinion time. And so mom's best friend went to the oncologist at her hospital, a couple of them, and said, here's what happened. Broke the whole thing down. And they said, and did the same thing. She said, so what do you think about the diagnosis? And they said, well, what's the data? And she goes, oh, that's the thing. There is none. They just palpated her neck. And the oncologist, I think, said some words, because this was more informal, but basically was like, what? And they're like, no, you don't do that. You don't give any possible cancer diagnosis without that. And so, long story short, we end up back at my primary care. Explain the whole story to him, to which, like I said, he's known me, or I don't know if I said that, but he has known me for 12 to 14 years. So he goes, we got to the lymphoma part, and he goes, what the? And caught himself. And he goes, get up on the table. And so we get up on the table, and he, pulled my hair back, and he goes, well, that is pretty swollen. And he goes, but you have such reactive lymph nodes. It could be a chronic infection. He's like, what did he say when you said chronic infection to him? And I said, well, he said it wasn't a chronic infection because I didn't have a fever. Which, just for those of you who don't know, chronic infections don't necessarily have fevers. I know because I had a chronic sinus infection the year before. That was a bacterial strain going around during cold and flu season that was drug resistant, but it wasn't one that you could heal yourself. It needed antibiotics. So went through that. This is very confusing looking over there, but this is very confusing. So I needed that. So that's what I needed. So that's what he said. And he goes, but you don't always run fevers with chronic infections. It's like, well, it's what mom said. And my best friend, and my mom's best friend, along with a couple other people. And he was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get a CT scan today. And I was like, okay. And he goes, like, after you leave here, you're going to go get a CT scan. And I was like, okay. So, got a CT scan. He got those results back. I couldn't get iodine with the CT scan because I'm allergic to shellfish. So it was inconclusive, which mom said the minute I walked out and she realized that I didn't get iodine. She said, that's going to be inconclusive. Sure enough, it was. She goes, you're going to have a biopsy. Because basically the CT scan said, well, could be infection, could be cancer. We can't really tell without the iodine. Recommends biopsy. So we see my doc the next Tuesday, so that was the 2nd. We see my doc on the 2nd, and he says, okay, I'm going to send you to this oncologist. And of course, I went like this, and he goes, not saying you have lymphoma. He was like, but I am not qualified to do this biopsy because it's a core needle biopsy. I'll explain the difference between that in a minute. He goes, but I'm not qualified to do that biopsy. And he goes, I mean, technically I could. He was like, but no, not going to. It's a very vascular area. We're not doing that. He goes, so this guy has a lot of people that can do it because they do it all the time for cancer. And he goes, and if it ends up being, and he was like, and I stress if it ends up being lymphoma, you're already in the hands that I would send you to. He goes, I've known this guy since med school. We went to med school together. He's a genius. I literally do not know anybody who's smarter than him. And he cares about his patients. Like, he genuinely cares. He goes, so he was like, my best friend got lymphoma. This is who I sent him to. He's recovered and 100% fine. He's like, he's good. So he's like, this is who I would send you to. So I said, okay. So like I said, that was the 2nd. We saw the oncologist on the Thursday afterwards. So we saw him 4th, 5th, whenever that Thursday is, 4th or the 5th. We saw him then. Go through the whole story with him, to which he says, well, you're never seeing that oncologist again. Or that, not oncologist, that ENT again. And I said, thank you. And so then he says that it could be, so he palpates my neck and he said, you have very reactive lymph nodes. So it could be a chronic infection. He goes, the thing that I'm worried about is lymphoma. He goes, a couple of those lymph nodes are real big, more than you would see with a chronic infection. He goes, though you're very reactive, so you could have a really bad infection in there. He goes, but the biopsy will tell us. He was like, so the biopsy, if it's an infection, is going to tell us what infection it is, and then it's going to tell us how to treat it. He was like, and if it's that, either I'll infuse you, or we'll get Dr. So, my primary care physician, to set up the infusions. So he was like, but if it turns out to be lymphoma, you're already established as a patient for me. So he pulled some strings and called in some favors and ended up, I got the biopsy the next day. So a core needle biopsy means that it's a hollow needle that shoots in a bunch of times into the lymph node and pulls out chunks of the lymph node, hoping to get lymphoma. We have a diagram over here, so I'll show you in a second. But lymphoma is different than every other cancer. So it ends up that, so your lymph node is round. It ends up that, let's see if I can cover my face enough that it focuses. Nope. So, oh, Lord almighty. So, it ends up that So that round part is your lymph node. The squiggly lines are the lymphoma. So lymphoma is not like regular cancer that it ends up where it's a mass. It is squiggly lines throughout your lymph nodes. So that's why it's so hard to get with a fine needle, which is what that ENT wanted to do, where they basically stick an insulin needle in it. So if they get lymphoma from that, basically you were lucky. Very, very, very lucky. Core needle is ultrasound guided. So they have a better chance of getting it. And where they normally take 3 core needle biopsies, they took 8 for me in one lymph node to try and hit it so that I could get a diagnosis. And they weren't going to leave me over the holiday season not knowing. So we do that. Had the best doctor for that too. He was amazing. I laughed a lot. And then, because I was awake for it. And then the next Tuesday, I see the oncologist again. So that was on Friday that I got the core needle. Next Tuesday, we see the oncologist again. Me, my mom, and my dad are in there. And he goes, okay, what you have is nodular sclerosis, Hodgkin's lymphoma. Backed by data. And I will tell you, and it's still smart, that stinking ENT was right. But as actually my oncologist said, it was just luck. He goes, I guarantee he hasn't felt enough of nodular sclerosis to have gotten that right. And he goes, so he was like, I haven't felt it a lot because it's that rare. So it's very rare, the kind that I have. Also caught the earliest because it pops up on your neck. So he goes through what our next steps are, and he goes, we're starting chemo next week. To which I was like, we can't wait until after Christmas? And he goes, no. He goes, while Hodgkin's lymphoma is very treatable, it is also very aggressive, and you can tell that by what it has done in 4 months in you. He was like, so I'm putting you at stage 2, really think you're 3 or 4. And we knew I was stage 2 because the largest lymph node, which is the one that they biopsied, was actually underneath my clavicle down here. And so we knew it was in, to which when he said that, of course, definitely my eyes and my dad's eyes, because he told me. I don't know about my mom's. I didn't make eye contact with them after the diagnosis because I knew they were crying and I was doing my best to hold it together. And so I didn't at the end, but came close to it. And so he, but when he said 3 or 4, I went like this, because, you hear cancer, stage 3 or 4, that's not good. To which he goes, no. He was like, just like it does squiggly lines, staging for lymphoma is very different as well. He goes, that is how many areas of your body it's in, not likelihood to be cured. And he goes, I've had a dude with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma in his bone marrow. So stage 4, let me explain the stages. Stage 2 means it's in 2 areas. So that's me. I have it from my diaphragm up, nowhere else. And luckily it's not. And so stage 3 means it's in other areas. Stage 4 is it's in your organs and or in your bone marrow. So I am stage 2. But he had a guy who was stage 4 who at 19 or 20 got diagnosed stage 4. And he said 6 months later was back on the football team, completely cured. So he goes, stage 4 doesn't mean anything. It's just, I need to know what I'm looking at. It basically affects length of treatment. So, he was like, but I'm putting you at stage 2 right now because we know that's definite. I was like, okay. He was like, so what we're going to do over the next week, you're going to get a PET scan, which is the scan to see cancer. So we know I have no other cancers. So that's at least good. So we're going to get a PET scan. We're going to get a echocardiogram, a PFT, which is a pulmonary function test, which is the breathing test. And then we're going to get your port put in, and we're going to have a bone marrow biopsy. All of that within a week. And you're going to do your chemo teach in a week. I was like, oh, okay. So, and sure enough, man, literally, I got diagnosed on Tuesday. I'm at chemo the next Thursday. So, 9 days later, I had my first chemo. So, I did get my port put in, and that's a scar right there. And then that's another scar, this thing right here. And then that little, I don't know if you can really see it, but you can if I turn. That is the port. And then that's the other scar. So that is where they put in the chemo. They do not draw blood out of it, but they do put in the chemo there. Anybody who has any good scar stuff, let me know, because that's going to scar really bad, because they're going to have to cut it again to get the port out, which I cannot wait for. I hate this thing with passion. But they're going to have to cut it to get the port out. So, got all of that done. And then started my chemo on the 22nd. Side effects are minimal, which I'm very thankful for. This group is phenomenal at managing probably the one side effect that everybody is the most worried about, which is basically throwing up your toenails all the time. I'm classy. So that's the one side effect everybody's worried about. That's the one that they are phenomenal at managing. So we get through that. They give me a anti-nausea medication infuse it right before they infuse the chemo. This medication was developed literally for chemo patients. And then they give me another anti-nausea, which is also a steroid. I don't really know what that one does, but it's for both. And then at home, I have Zofran and Compazine. So should I get nauseous at home, which luckily is minimal, I can take those. And then they give me, and then what other side effects do I have? I have really bad acid. So they infuse famotidine so that my acid goes away. So that doesn't make me nauseous. And then I have bloating. There's not much they can do about that. It's a side effect of two of the meds. Except for they told me to take Gas X, and massage has actually helped more than anything. So you kind of massage where your intestines and stuff are, and kind of underneath the rib cage and then down to basically your pelvic area. And I use a massage gun. I have one of those percussor guns, and I use it on the lowest setting possible. Do not go higher than that so you don't bruise your intestines. But that, and it helps to kind of dissipate that bloating. And then I do, let's see, what other side? I have neuropathy already. That's inherited. So I get it from every member of my mom's family had it. And my mom has it. So I get it from that side of the family. But it has gotten a little worse. And so we're monitoring that. And basically, I don't know if anybody knows, I'm underneath a blanket, 75 outside, but I'm in a blanket inside my house because it's very important that I keep warm and keep my legs warm. So I do that. I'm working from the couch right now. We'll be back in my office in a bit, like next week, because I am waiting for my little space here. I have a big one, but I'm waiting for my little one to go underneath my desk so it can hit on my legs so that they stay warm. Because that's like, for weirdly, the coldest spot in my whole entire house is right underneath my desk. So I have that coming. So I'm working from my couch until then, so I can just stay warm. And then fatigue is a big thing. And it's not really, I'm so tired, I need to sleep all the time fatigue. It's more muscle fatigue for the most part. Now, I am pretty tired on, my chemos are on Thursdays, the Sunday after, Monday, Tuesday, sometimes Wednesday. I'm pretty tired. And and I do sleep probably 10, 12 hours during those nights. But after that, I'm kind of back to normal. The fatigue is really of the muscles. So only way to equate it is like working out for an hour and a half, and your legs are like, I need to sit down, I'm done. But I've just been cleaning my kitchen for 10 or 15 minutes. So that being said, what took me like an hour or maybe two, if I'm doing a deep clean of my house, takes me 2 to 3 days now. Which drives me crazy because my house is never really fully clean right now, and it just drives me bonkers. But whatever. So then, in addition to that, I do have the hair loss. So there are 2 types of hair loss with chemo. There is the patchy, which is where like chunks, areas, and that's when people start shaving their heads. And then there's all over, just thinning, which is what I have. Thank the Lord. Because I know how to deal with this. So I have PCOS as well. And in my early 20s, before we got that regulated, I ended up losing probably 50, maybe even 60% of my hair due to hormonal issues, before we got that kind of regulated. And so I know how to deal with that. And that's fine. And I can regulate that, and that's fine. I know how to grow it back. So we're what I thought was going to be the most emotional part, being a female, that hair is a big deal to us. And I thought that was going to be the most emotional part. Turns out it's the part where it's like, yeah, been here, done that, whatever. So then, let's see, I'm also what you call neutropenic now, meaning I have no immune system. So a normal white blood count is between 4 and 11. 11 is where they kind of start to get worried because that's too high. But 4 is the extreme low end of normal. I am at 2.5, meaning a common cold will land me in the hospital. So other side effect, I'm now quarantined. Which, up until I talked to my best friend this week, maybe last week, days blend together now. But I talked to her this week, last week, sometime. And I said, I don't understand why this quarantine is just so much harder on me. I was like, I did fine during COVID. And she goes, yeah, but this is different, Jamie. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, during COVID, if you ended up needing some groceries, you could get up at what I call the butt crack of dawn, and get up at 6 and be at the grocery store 6, 7 o'clock, get what you need and leave. And she was like, you can't do that now. And I said, no, I can't. And she goes, this is literal strict quarantine. She was like, you go to your doctor's appointments and you come home. She goes, that has got to be hard. And it is. It is pretty hard. I'm an introvert by nature. So being alone doesn't really bug me. But not being able to be like, oh, I need to go to Target for something. And go to Target, that's hard. Not being able to have freedom to do what I want. Not easy. Can't go to Trader Joe's. And Trader Joe's doesn't allow third-party delivery companies in there. Trader Joe's. That needs to change. This has changed my outlook on everything. Like, allow at least one. I'm not saying allow all. But for people like me who can't, because of an illness, go there. Or people who are homebound because of an injury and they can't leave. Like, they can't get Trader Joe's anymore. Isn't that cool? allow, even if it's like Amazon Fresh. I don't know if they can do that, but something like that. Allow them to come in and do it, please. Be nice. And then, so that part's hard. I'm gonna miss, this is where I might cry. I'm gonna miss one of my families, so my friends who I consider family, the last of us, besides me, is getting married. And I'm gonna miss that wedding. And it's the only wedding I've missed, ever. We're not gonna talk about that a whole lot more, because I will start crying. And it severely upsets me that I'm missing that. They're gonna be awesome, and I'm gonna be in cardboard at the wedding. So there is that. I can't wait for those pictures. But, you know, is what it is. And he doesn't blame me. He isn't upset at all. I mean, he's upset that I'm not going to be there because I have cancer, and the fact that I have cancer. Not in the fact that I'm not going to be there. That didn't really make sense. But you people understand what I'm saying. Also, chemo brain's a thing. For all you people who have ever been pregnant, oh my gosh, I have new respects for your whole pregnancy brain thing. Chemo brain's a thing, and it's hard, and I'm very foggy a lot. It's another side effect. Very foggy. Sometimes finding words are very hard. And so I am upset about that. Missing that wedding's got me. My brother couldn't come in town for Christmas, nor could my nephew. Again, because of my white blood cell count. He couldn't come, and that's very hard too. So it's not easy, but I'm dealing with it. You know, I hope somebody FaceTimes me, hint, hint, clue, clue, at the wedding and says hi. Or WhatsApp video me, whatever. I don't care. Hope somebody says hi. And then, let's see. What else? Oh, for the neutropenic, I don't know if I said this. So if I have, fast forward through this part. I am taking this stuff called ARMRA, which ARMA. ARMRA. ARMRA. ARMRA, which is a bovine colostrum. And that is supposed to hopefully help my white blood cell count. We'll see. Hello, we're having focusing issues. Hopefully help my white blood cell count. So it is at the point where I found it because I found this guy who was talking about, he had non-Hodgkin's, and his white blood cell count was less than mine because they were injecting him with stuff to try and get it up. And they're not there with me. So, he started taking this ARMRA. He found it through something else. Started taking the ARMRA, and within 21 days of taking it, he was out of neutropenic. Meaning he may still be low end of normal, but at least he was normal. So we're hoping that means that I still have to be really careful. But I can go out for walks in the nature, which I may still do anyway if I can find a time when people really aren't out, and still do that anyway so I can stay away from people. But we're also concerned about the sinus infections and stuff, and those of you who live in Texas, it's mountain cedar season, which means sinuses, allergies, insane. So all of that. And then I'm taking that to hopefully raise it up. So then even when I'm done with my chemo, hopefully it's easier to get quicker to get my white blood cell count back up. And my robust immune system back up. I do have weight loss. I lost 10 pounds already. And I've only had 2 treatments. So I've been doing this for a month and I've lost 10 pounds. We expect between 20, 30, possibly 40. That's where everybody gets a little iffy. but I am having to do 80 grams of protein a day. It's a lot of protein for a girl who could very easily become a vegetarian because I don't eat meat a whole lot. It's very hard. I'm drinking a lot of these guys. So these guys right here, they're really good. Anybody who's from the 80s and 90s, this is like Nesquik, strawberry Nesquik. That's what it tastes like. But it's Fairlife Nutrition Plan protein. So it's got a lot of minerals and that kind of stuff in it too. But it's 30 grams of protein per serving. So I drink a couple of those. I eat 1, maybe 2 meals a day. And that's about it. But, you know, as long as we knew I was going to lose weight, that was never a question. Docs told us I was going to lose weight. What we don't, so my body is using to help with the fatigue and the fighting of the lymphoma, is using fat for energy. Which is good. Could stand to lose some weight. So, you know, and I'm not saying that as a girly thing. I because I have a heart condition, I really should lose some weight. Could stand to lose them. But, so all of that, but I've lost 10 pounds already. As long as it doesn't start deteriorating my muscles, so using my muscles for energy, which is where the protein comes in. Let it use the fat, let it use the protein from that. We're good. We're happy with it. So that's what we're doing. Drinking crap ton of water a day, between 64 and 80 ounces, in addition to any other liquids I may drink, of water to keep my kidneys flushed. Anything else? Not that I can think of. We know that other things will probably come up, side effects wise, but hopefully it should be minimal. So we're hoping it stays on the minimal track. That I really, next steps. So after my February 2nd appointment, I will get another echo, another PFT, which is the pulmonary function test, and another PET scan to make sure I'm at where they think I'm going to be at, which means after that, I will have 4 more chemos and then I'm done. So I'm a quarter of the way through. Knock on wood that all stays true. And should hopefully be done by March 30th. That should hopefully be my last one. So, hoping and praying. And that's where we're at. It's the story. So let's go. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. If you want to know the oncologist team, if you're in the DFW area, which hopefully you don't need it, but if you do, you can leave it in the comments and I'll DM you. I'm not going to put that on public. So, just safety reasons, not going to put that on public. But if you need it, let me know. And hope everybody has a great rest of their day. I'm actually hungry, so I'm going to go eat something. I don't know what, but I'm going to go eat.